Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tic Tac Taiko. This week I thought I would do another top 10 list, or in this case a top 9 list, on new instructors in Taiko. And a new instructor can be a lot of different things. For example, maybe you've taught a little while in your group, but you're having trouble hitting your stride and feeling success. Or maybe you haven't taught yet, but you really would like to, it feels very daunting, it makes you nervous. Or you have been teaching for a while in your group, but you would like to teach outside of your group, maybe at a Taiko conference or a gathering, but you're not really sure how to teach to people that you're not comfortable with. So if you're any of those things, this week's video is for you. But if you're not teaching, if you're not planning on teaching anytime soon, you're still gonna find some interesting stuff in this week's video, because sooner or later, everyone teaches someone something. Before we dive into the list, I wanted to do a shameless plug for, well, me. Since this list is all about teaching, I wanted to remind people that I offer a wide variety of Taiko workshops that you can see up on the list here. If there's something you're interested in and you'd like to bring me out to your group or groups in your area, let me know. If there's something you're interested in that's not on this list, we can still have a conversation. There's a lot that I can offer. So feel free to reach out to me at tictactaiko@gmail.com and I'll put the link below. Enough about me, let's get to this week's list. As an instructor, it's really important to understand what your teaching style is. Maybe you're a visual teacher. You like to pose and position yourself and demonstrate. You're a model for students to follow. Or maybe you're a verbal teacher. You like to explain a concept or idea so that there's a lot of clarity behind it. Or maybe you're a tactile teacher. You like to actually touch and move and pose a person so they understand how it's supposed to feel. You can find a lot of information online about teaching styles, what styles there are. I'm not going to get super into that here. The most important thing is to identify what your style is so that you can then know the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths generally are going to be pretty easy to figure out. So what you want to focus on are the weaknesses of your style. And this is, in my opinion, where you're going to find the most value as an instructor. Quick example, if you're a verbal teacher, you want to know what traps to avoid. For example, saying too much and forgetting to let the students actually do the thing that you're talking about. In addition to your teaching style, you also want to identify your teaching personality. For example, maybe you like to be very focused when you're teaching. You make sure everybody knows what you're planning on doing and what's expected, and everybody's on board for the whole journey. Or maybe you like to use a lot of humor. You're funny when you're teaching. Helps people sort of be at ease and more comfortable with what you're doing. Or maybe you like to be really fair when you teach. You make sure everybody has the same amount of time on the drums, everybody has the same opportunity to say things or ask questions, regardless of what it is. Just like a teaching style, you want to know what it is so that you can identify the strengths and the weaknesses. And once you have your teaching style and your teaching personality or personalities, it could be more than one, you have a combination of who you are as a teacher. When you're there, you then have to start thinking, how would you teach people who are diametrically different in how they learn? For example, let's say you're a very exuberant, very tactile teacher, and that works for you, works great, until you hit a group of shy, introverted students, and your style of teaching is their worst nightmare. Not only are you making them feel really uncomfortable, they're not learning because they're spending so much energy just trying to deal with your energy. And it's not that it's your fault, it's not that it's their fault, neither one of you is at fault. It's just clashing. If you're in that situation and you're trying to figure out how to teach someone differently, it can be really difficult on the fly. Really good to understand, again, the combination of personality and style that you are, and then develop backups, contingency plans for when you do hit students that don't learn the way you teach. And there's definitely a skill in identifying how different students learn, but that's something that comes with a lot of teaching experience. The next three things on this list, numbers 4, 5, and 6, all come from very common critiques of workshops at North American Taiko Conference, of which I do the surveys for. The first one is that the person who's really good at doing a thing is not necessarily the person who's really good at teaching the thing, because doing and teaching are two separate skill sets. Very often, the person that can teach it better is the one who can't do it as well, but wants to, who has spent time struggling to get better and better and better. Let's say, for example, you're taking a workshop from somebody who's really talented, but hasn't spent a lot of time breaking things down. And you're saying, I'm having trouble with this. They may not have an answer. They may only be able to tell you to keep practicing or do it like this. Well, if I could do it like that, I wouldn't need this workshop. Conversely, you talk to the person that's been struggling and you say, I'm having trouble doing this. They may very well say, yeah, I had that problem too, and this is what I did. Or, oh, that's interesting. Try this thing, try that thing. Because they've had this experience of breaking things down in order to understand it, in order to do it, they can almost impart this institutional knowledge on those who are struggling, who have gone or are going on a similar path. Now, I'm not saying that the naturally talented person can't also be a good teacher, but often that doesn't come unless there's been a lot of practice teaching. If you're really good at something and you want to teach it to the community, thank you, absolutely, please do that. But it's really important to understand how you would teach it to people who aren't good at it. A very common critique I see is when the instructor is very vague about the objectives or doesn't state them at all. As an instructor, you don't want your students leaving with a question mark over their head. Did I learn what I was supposed to learn? I mean, I learned something, but was it the right somethings? I mean, they might be really happy, but you want them to know for sure they learned what you wanted to teach. Stating the objectives of a workshop at the beginning of a workshop is a great way to sort of establish a contract between you and your students. So let's say I tell you I'm going to teach you A, B, C, and D. Now, as the student, you now know I have a plan, and for some people, it's very reassuring to know there is a plan. And when you leave the workshop, you can then gauge the success of that workshop, not solely, but somewhat based on, okay, A, B, C, D, I learned A, B, C, D, that worked. And as the instructor, having that contract is a really good way to keep focused so that I'm going to do A, B, C, D and not I'm doing A, B, and oh, J is interesting. And ooh, have we talked about P or W? And getting off track like that is what often leaves students feeling very unsettled at the end of a workshop. Again, did I learn what I was supposed to? Who knows? The number one critique, complaint, whatever you want to call it, across years and years and years of conference workshops has been an instructor running out of time. When an instructor runs out of time, generally one of two things happens. Either A, they have to drop something, which really sucks if you've stated your objectives, which you should be doing. So if I say, hey, we're going to do A, B, C, D, oh, we don't have time for D. Now you know you didn't get what you paid for or came for, and I know I didn't succeed in what I was trying to do. Or B, you have nice, generous pacing at the beginning, and then, oh crap, I don't have time for this at the end. You got to cram it in, boom. And what's really unfortunate is the stuff near the end of a workshop tends to be the more advanced stuff or the more interesting stuff. And if that's crammed in, people don't have time to really learn it or absorb it, and they leave a workshop feeling stressed and unsettled and sometimes just unhappy. There are two things that I learned as a teacher that help me manage my time better. The first thing I do is to plan to do less. Maybe 75% of what I think I could do in an allotted amount of time. And I don't know about you, but for me, I always want to teach more. I want to fill up every single minute, but that's not feasible. And it leads to, again, either cutting things out or cramming things up at the end. So having a buffer, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be there, but having a buffer allows me to have some breathing room. I also like to prepare what I call modules, things that are related to the subject matter that I can add in that aren't connected necessarily, that don't need to be built up or set up. I can just say, hey, we did all of this stuff. Let's add this thing onto it or this thing onto it. Or another option is when you have buffer time to go back to stuff you already did to improve on it or just to see what's stuck. And the second thing I do is to prepare checkpoints. For example, if I know I have 2 hours to teach a thing, I will plan where I want to be every 30 minutes. And then I'll look 30, 60, 90, where am I? How am I in relation to where I want it to be? And then I adjust accordingly. It's really important to just know, just acknowledge that as an instructor, sometimes you fail. Just like you fail as a student, you fail as an instructor. But knowing that it's going to happen means you can get your mental armor on, you can prepare a little bit, and you can learn from it. For example, let's say in your group, you're told, here's a group of students, teach them this song, and they need to learn it by this date. And it doesn't happen. That sucks. Or you're hired to teach a workshop, to teach 20 students some kind of material, and at the end, they didn't all get it. That sucks. So knowing that it's going to happen, but being prepared for it means you can also learn from it, and that's important. It's really important to actually understand and define what a failure is. Most of us tend to think of failure in binary terms. I failed, or I succeeded, or I failed and I didn't. But the reality of it is that failure isn't usually that black and white. Let's go back to that group of people you were told to teach a song to by a certain date and it didn't happen. Maybe they were very inconsistent with their attendance. They weren't showing up enough to really learn the song, or they weren't practicing it in their spare time or between rehearsals, so there was no way they were going to get that song done. Is that your fault? Is that your failure? I don't think so. Or let's take that workshop. You had 20 people, you were going to teach a thing, and they didn't all get it. Let's say 17 out of 20 did get it. Is that a failure? Is that unfortunate? Maybe that's even a win. But having a binary mindset of passing, failing, or succeeding, failing, often means if it's not a success, then it has to be a failure. And that's just not the case. This boils down to when you had control and when you didn't. And even this isn't as black and white as I'm presenting it. It's very gray. There's a lot of subjectivity, just like failure versus success. You want to be careful not to make excuses like, well, they were going to fail anyways. I didn't need to try harder. But you also want to be kind to yourself. 17 out of 20 is pretty good, and I can get better. The last point on this list, number 9, is the most important thing I could probably say on this list and many others. Throughout your entire life, you will have 2 teachers accompanying you. One is failure and one is fear. Failure is an excellent teacher if you let it teach you. Sometimes it means dealing with a bruised ego or hurt feelings. We're all human. But if you let those failures teach you, you get better. Think of all or any of the teachers that you admire, whether it's Taiko or otherwise. I guarantee you that they have gone through so many failures to get as good as they are. Maybe even more failures than you and I have had successes. But if you avoid situations where you might fail because you don't like to feel uncomfortable or look stupid in front of others or appear weak, whatever the reason, then you're letting fear be your teacher. And let me tell you something, fear is a shitty teacher. I mean, don't get me wrong. Fear is a great survival teacher. If you're lost in the forest and there's a bush that's rustling, you don't know if there's a snake or a bear behind it or if it's just the wind, you get fight or flight. Fear is great for survival. You don't need it for a performing art. For something like Taiko, when fear becomes your teacher, your skills stop growing. They stagnate. And in some cases, when fear becomes a very comfortable teacher, I've seen people who make excuses for why it's okay that their skills don't grow, or they think their skills are way better than they are. They've convinced themselves otherwise because it's a comfortable illusion. Look, we're all human. Whether you're a player, a performer, an instructor, fear will eventually inform some of your Taiko. But you don't have to go to it. Let it come to you. When it happens, it happens. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying failure is great. We should all fail more. No, failure sucks. But you know what? If you own your failures, if you're honest with yourself and whoever's involved, if you're vulnerable and if you're transparent, then failure loses its power over you, but not its value. All right, we've successfully ended another list, but if you think there were things that should have been on this list that I didn't include, go ahead and comment below. Let me and others know your thoughts. If there's an idea or a list that you would like to see me tackle, you have my email address or you can comment below. And if you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And until next time, keep on practicing and be well.